everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'll be swatching out my Ohuhu marker blends. If you happen to have caught it a while ago when I purchased my 120 set of markers from Ohuhu, I swatched out the individual colors. So that's a separate video. If you're interested, I'll link to it in the upper right hand corner. But in this video, I'm actually swatching out the blends, and that's how I generally use these markers. Is I'll refer to that swatch sheet that I showed at the very beginning, and I'll pick out the color that I want to color in, the stamped image or whatever digi image I want to color. And so if it's not on that swatch sheet, there's a very low percentage chance of me actually using it. And so using that color. So I thought that I would actually swatch it using this system, which is swatch sheets that are a digital file available from the Artful Angel shop. And so you can check that out if you are interested in anything that I'm using. I'll try to leave links to it in the description box below. But basically, what's nice about this swatch sheet is that you can actually color in whatever section, is most relevant. So I actually really have found that now that I've done this, it's useful to actually see these blends in the context of how they would be used. So, by coloring the face and neck of what's supposed to be a skin tone blend, I can actually see once I've applied it in that context whether it passes as a skin tone. So that's really helpful. And also by coloring like a larger area than just like a line, I can actually see how successful it is of a blend in that context too. If you're not interested in actually seeing the coloring, the process of coloring, I'm going to timestamp this video so you can pop on over to the end where I do a final flip through of my swatch book as it stands currently. And that way, as you look at the swatches, if there's a particular color blend that you want to replicate for yourself, if you happen to have any of these markers, then feel free to just pause the video and then, take a screenshot or scribble down the marker colors and use these blends if they're at all useful to you. I still have to swatch out the few Copics that I have that are not skin tones. I have a few, maybe a dozen or so Nuvo alcohol markers that have come in craft kits that still need to be swatched out. I don't have enough of either of those to really do a video on them, so you probably won't see a separate video of me swatching those out. But the next time maybe I'll do an updated flip through of my swatch book with all of those included though. Then just want to touch on how I created my Ohuhu blends though, because unlike Copics, the naming convention, it's, at least for me, it's not obvious what the numbers mean. There's a letter which suggests the color family, but the numbers in terms of what I've picked out to be blends, they don't really tell you, saturation or hue or anything like that. So basically how I arrived at these blends is through trial and error. So after I swatched out each of the individual markers, I kind of studied that swatch sheet and tried to find a light, a mid, and a dark that might look good together. And then I swatched out a line. As you saw, my final swatch sheet at the very beginning. And if it looked good, then it stayed. If it didn't look good, then I don't use it. So that's basically, kind of how I approached it. And, if I found two that worked well and I just needed to tweak the third, then I would just experiment and try to find something else. Sometimes, and in particular, I struggle a lot with the purples, and unfortunately, I don't think I hit the record button when I did my purple swatches of the Ohuhus. You'll see the final in the flip through, but you won't see me actually coloring it because I don't think I hit record. But in some cases, I was only able to find two colors, and so the way I approach coloring with two colors is a little bit different. than how I would color with 3 or more, but not a ton different. Basically how I approach the coloring is I start where I believe the shadows are, and I do very simple, the light is coming straight from the front, and so the shadows are going to be on the left and right edges. And so I start with my darkest color in the shadow areas, then I color with the mid-tone right over that darkest area. And then I go for a final pass of the lightest color over basically everything. That said, I do like to color in smaller areas at a time so that the alcohol marker stays wet on the paper as I kind of add these different layers. And basically, when you're coloring with alcohol markers, it's not that the colors are actually melding and blending together. It's the alcohol markers are transparent, so you're really just laying color on top of each other. But when you're layering something that's wet onto something that's still wet, that does tend to kind of bleed or meld together a little bit better than layering something wet onto something that's already dried. What's already dried is a little bit more set, a little bit more locked in. And so when you go to layer something on top of it, you're layering a transparent color over a color that's already set. Whereas if you layer onto something that's still wet, that color hasn't completely set yet. So the transparent color of what you're layering on top of it's going to sink in a little bit more. It's going to mix a little bit more with that previous color. And so that's why you get a smoother transition if you're trying to color fast and kind of keep the edges a little bit more wet. But you can use that to your advantage. If you want a color to be a little bit more set and not change as much, you can let that area dry and then layer more color on top of it. So that's how I approach my coloring. And that's basically, I think that's it. So hopefully I mentioned that I'll leave links to everything that I use. The Ohuhu markers I use are in the general supply section of all of my videos, but the swatch sheet I'll leave a link to where you can get that from the Artful Angel shop. The mini cinch that I use to actually create the binding, I'll leave a link to that. And I think the Artful Angel shop is going to start carrying these discs as well from, I believe, Waffle Flowers. So I'm actually curious to I'm gonna pick up a set if it whenever it does hit the shop, because they come in really nice colors, and there's a teal color that I really want to check out, and it's slightly larger than the rings, the discs that I currently have, and I think I'm gonna have to upgrade my discs again. The way this is going so far, my Swatchbook is getting nice and fat. The other thing I don't think I mentioned is that I'm coloring onto hammer mill paper. Super smooth. It's great for alcohol marker coloring, and it's what I do most of my coloring on. Most of the time I color onto 100-pound hammer mill. Sometimes I color onto 80-pound. So it just depends on what I happen to have. But the 100-pound tends to, because it's thicker, it can take in more ink, and you can get more layers. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to mention with my coloring. I'm going for like a quick coloring, just one pass of dark, mid, light. But when I actually go to color a real image, I'll often do a second pass. So if in coloring the darkest areas with my midtone and my lightest color, if it washed out my shadows too much, then I'll go back in and maybe deepen the shadows a bit. If there's some areas that don't look like a really smooth transition, then I'll work on those areas a little bit. I haven't done any of that here. I'm just trying to lay down just one layer, one pass, I should say, not one layer, but one pass of coloring. And that way I can really get a sense for how well these markers blend just in one pass, and I know when I look at it whether I can work at it a little bit more and smooth out some of those transitions. So that's all there is that I think I have to say about the my swatching process and my color blend creation process. So what I'll do is I'll set the rest of this video to some music. And I won't rejoin you at the end with a voiceover, so I'll just say my goodbyes now. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Enjoy the rest of the video. Bye.